Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. We are going to get ourselves started with our fantastic event for today. We have about, for the folks in Zoom, I'll let you know we have about 40 or so people in the room here with us at the Parker Hill branch of the Boston Public Library. And for the folks in the room, at last count, we had about 18, 20 people on the Zoom. So we have quite the full house here to celebrate all of these fantastic writers. My name is Theresa Okokon. My pronouns are she, her, and I have the pleasure of teaching this group of fantastic and extremely talented writers for the second year in a row now. And thank you. And helping them to create this anthology of some of their most recent work. And we named this year's anthology Time Capsule. So I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and then we will get ourselves started. For folks in the room, I want to remind you to please turn the power on your cell phones, or at least the volume, if not the power, even better, all the way down, so that we aren't accidentally interrupted by anybody who's trying to contact you. And if you are getting people sending you text messages or anything and they're having trouble accessing the Zoom, you can come and find me, or like make a signal to me in some way, and I will come and find you, and I will do my best to help you out with that. But otherwise, if you can please have your cell phone sound turned all the way down. This microphone is the live mic in the room, but it's pretty strong. So like if we're very noisy in the room, it's probably going to pick up. And then we are recording this event so that the women have it in their records, and all of that's just going to be in there. So just keep that in mind. If you're joining us on Zoom and you didn't hear my announcement earlier, we ask that you please keep yourselves muted on the Zoom, like using the mute function on Zoom. I'll also be watching the Zoom room and I will mute folks that are unmuted. But if you can please keep yourselves muted because your sound, I think we fixed it so it's not coming into the room, but it will come into the recording. So if you can please keep yourself muted, that would be great. Folks in the Zoom chat should be open and available for you to use, and please use it. The women of this group work so hard on their writing and this work, and they really want to know what you think about it. They want to like hear you hype them. They want to like have you be here and participate. So please be using the Zoom chat, and anything that you say to the women in the Zoom chat, I will make note of in my trusty little notebook here, and I will bring it up and let everybody here know the comments and feedback and wonderful shout outs that you're giving. So please use the Zoom chat. For the folks in the room, the way that you can participate and be giving feedback and shout outs and all that kind of stuff to the women is after we finish our reading portion for the event, we will have a Q&A session just for the folks in the room. For lots of reasons, it gets complicated if we keep the Zoom open for that. So we'll close the Zoom after the readings, and then we'll have a Q&A with the folks who are in the room. Is all of that making sense to people? Wonderful. The last logistical thing is that there is a key right here for folks who are in the room on the stage, and that is the key to the 2 restrooms that are in the hallway. So if you need to use the restroom, you've got to take the key with you, and then please return the key to this corner of the stage, so if somebody else needs to use the restroom, they can pick it up and take it with them when they go. Okay? Wonderful. Okay, so I begin each year of the anthology, or the coach and instructor begins each year of the anthology with a little note to start off the booklet. And so I'm just going to read for you what I wrote for this booklet and for the women this year. This is my second year with the honor of coaching, guiding, teaching, and editing the work of this fantastic group of women. I was so happy to be asked back, and I dove into this session of workshops with the goal of challenging the women to think deeply about themselves, the people around them, and the role they each play in the world. This year, the essay assignments included writing about an object, shining a spotlight on somebody else, interviewing and dialogue, and writing about age. I think you'll see some of the themes of this beautiful work I think you'll see some of those themes in the beautiful work that you're going to be hearing today. Or maybe you will not. Something else that came up quite a bit this year was a reminder of what it means to be an artist. My role as coach and teacher is to provide guidance and assignments, and their role as writers is to do literally whatever they want, as long as they write something. Many workshops began with an apology for not following the rules and a quick response from the group that the only rule is to be writing. I'm delighted about the work that came from this series of workshops, only a fraction of which is shared within these pages and for you all to hear today. I hope this writing allows you to reflect on the role of music in your life. I hope it makes you think about memory and how the past is always present. I hope it helps you recognize and love your body. I hope it gets you thinking about what it means to grow older. I hope this work creates a time capsule of your smiles, your frowns, your laughter, your sighs. I hope it makes you feel. And to the women of the Mission Hill Women's Writing Group, I hope you all keep writing. I love each and every one of you. So this year, for their bios in the back of the booklet, the women included how many years they've been with the group, what they're reading or what they're reading at that time, where they're from, and I think like something about like what's encouraging them or something along those lines. So I'm going to be reading each one of those introductions. So our first reader is Tolly Graham. Tolly has been with the Mission Hill Women's Writers Group for 7 years. At the time of writing, Tolly was reading everything from nonfiction like The Power of the Broker by Robert Caro to rereading the novel Green by her son, Sam Graham-Felsen. Though different, they are both stories about society from the perspective of privilege, power, race, and identity. Tolly writes to remember and reflect on her life experiences. Writing is a skill that she hopes to improve with this wonderful group and coach. Thank you, Tolly. Tolly grew up in Levittown, New York, and has lived in Jamaica Plain for 45 years. Please join me in welcoming Tolly Graham.
A love letter to Joe. The towers ruptured ablaze, and then the falling. Papers dancing in the air, drafts like a celebration you weren't invited to. Then people like falling dancers, then the collapse. Everyone, survivors and the responders alike, walked and ran like ghosts coated in white ash among the toxic cloud of Lower Manhattan in September 11th, 2001. Now, 2 blue shafts of light beam upward each September 11th for 24 hours to symbolize the space where the Twin Towers once stood. They were framed within the narrow view from the small kitchen table across from the bathtub in a one-room Manhattan apartment of our son, Joe. He moved there in 2007 to live alone for the first time in his life after graduating from art school. Joe, a tall, beefy artist, self-identified artist since he was 12 years old, is a man of few words. His massive calves and muscled arms easily mistake him for a former football player. The double blazes we see each September 11th were conceived as an art installation by 2 New York City artists, Julien Lavardière and Paul Nyota, as they viewed the disastrous scene from that night from the Brooklyn side of Lower Manhattan. Through the smoke, they saw the searchlights set up to illuminate the rescue efforts, and layered with their artistic sensibilities, envisioned those searchlights as ghostly illuminated plumes. Searching for people from more than 90 countries, their presence like phantom limbs. It was a brilliant and simple concept meant for healing. The installation, originally called Towers of Light, was changed to Tribute of Light because the surviving families felt that the original name emphasized the destroyed buildings as opposed to the people killed there. Where were you on 9/11? My angst from that day still clings to me, even though I hated how our country became obsessed with revenge and was based on false facts. As a mother, my first concern was for my own children. Joe and Jake were at their Boston schools that morning. I don't remember how they got home. We allowed them to watch the World Trade Center towers collapsing once before we turned the TV off. My husband and I were also panicked because our son was flying back from Paris, our son Sam. Finally, after his plane landed, Sam whispered from his dying cell phone that they were parked on a tarmac among a sea of planes in Nova Scotia. The pilot still had not informed them what was going on. The light towers Joe viewed back in 2007 were like sign language for a space no longer there, yet ephemeral as night sky and weather shaped and held them as placeholders for us to remember. Months later, Joe would finish a white canvas with simple black lettering. I watch airplanes to see what they will do. 10 years later, Joe was working at the 9/11 Memorial Museum in the Conservancy Department, just blocks from the Ground Zero site, where he now lives with his partner and children. Joe once told a reporter that the collapse of the Twin Towers greatly influenced him as a middle schooler, and even more so after a family visit to the site with his grandmother a few months later. He kept thinking about the site, the event, and memorialization. For Joe, the collapse of the towers wasn't just about America's vulnerability, and for nearly 2 decades, his artwork was aimed at provoking viewers to think about the effects of war and terrorism on all of us, here and abroad. Joe's work showed pain, loss, chaos, mistaken identity, and the endless battles over faith, ideology, and political consequences. A 4-foot by 5-foot photo of an otherwise typical kitchen scene, but absent the family who are about to have breakfast, still hangs in his older brother's house. Subtle clues show you they're Muslim, and the kitchen is in a German home. The story, based on that of a Muslim father arrested in a home raid, misidentified terrorist suspect. A friend once asked us, does Joe do this art because he wonders about not being in the military himself? I too have wondered this, since we have many friends whose sons unexpectedly enrolled in the military after September 11th. But no, Joe is an intellectual artist who, despite his lack of explanation, is just telling us an important story. A few years ago, Joe took a deep breath, left his work at the 9/11 Museum, and decided to take a break from the art that he had been doing. He told us he needed to reevaluate the focus of his work and how he might express his art moving forward. I am now thinking of comments by both Lavardiere and Mayotta about the emotional impact of their work in creating the Towers of Light. They said they have no interest in creating another public memorial. I think Joe might agree with their comment. The tribute was never meant to only symbolize America. It was meant to symbolize the loss of life, period. All of them. There are no borders on life. And as I reflect on the Towers of Light, I am reminded of a quote from another important person, Viet Thanh Nguyen, a Vietnamese American professor and author. He says, all wars are fought twice, the first time on the battlefield, the second time in memory. I'm a grandmother now, and I know that trauma and generational family memories infiltrate our lives, yet I am still hopeful. And I know that Joe will find another version of this hope in his work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tali, for that beautiful essay and for your work. Our next reader is Joyce Harvey, who's been with the Mission Hill Women's Writers Group for 9 years. At the time of writing, Joyce was reading her news feeds as she hadn't chosen a new book yet. Joyce is originally from Boston and currently lives in Four Corners, Dorchester, and she writes to express herself and to show herself that she can. Please join me in welcoming Joyce Harvey.
Aging. Aging. One hears that word so often these days. How has it become so in vogue to use the word instead of phrases, getting older, or is a senior? Perhaps I view it as a pejorative. We don't say that children are aging. We say they're growing up or getting older. Why is it then that when we're speaking of or referring to people who are past a certain age, we say aging? I know that I'm a senior, and I'm happy to have finally achieved that status so I can get some of the perks that go with being a senior. Can people let me enjoy it without reminding me of my age? Once one is born, one will get older, or one will die. Few have the disease of Benjamin Button that causes one to age backwards. I'm glad to be getting older because I'm not ready to die yet. I don't want to live as long as Methuselah, but I would like to live a while longer. Jimmy Carter, who just turned 100, said he wanted to live long enough to vote for Kamala Harris. He did, although his vote didn't guarantee a win for her. At one point in life, I wanted to live to be 151 so I could see in another century. But I have since decided against it. Although I'm making younger friends, there might come a time when even they're gone. And I don't want to outlive my health or those I love or am fond of. I don't want to outlive my usefulness. Recently, I saw a set of twins on the news who were 105. One of them said that she was her sister's eyes, while her sister was her ears, or something like that. I'm a twin and can't imagine what life would be like without my sister. We're not as close as we once were, and we now live hundreds of miles apart. But I'm not able to think of myself as independent of her. She's always been there. We used to have a sense of what the other was feeling, and for all I know, my twin may still have that ability. I haven't asked her how she feels about aging or getting older. If I have, I've forgotten the answer. Years ago, when I worked for the long-term care unit of the Massachusetts Provider Enrollment Division, I was invited to visit a nursing home down the Cape. The owner was so proud of his new facility, but I couldn't bring myself to go. The space was physically very pretty, but unfortunately, I had already visited someone else's nursing home where my friend's grandmother was staying. They had tied her to the chair. I don't know if they were afraid that she would fall out or wander, but the idea of being tied to a chair does not appeal to me, regardless of the reason. Maybe that's the image I have when I think about getting older and why I consider it something to eschew. I want to continue being active and vital. In fact, I recently had a dream about meeting two dark-haired, good-looking men. Although they were strangers, before the dream ended, I had somehow kissed them both. That dream held the promise that I am still attractive, still vibrant, not ancient and beyond my time. I know that I'm not as stable as I was 20 years ago, and while I'm less spry, I want to be relevant, needed. I don't want my only visitors to be my family or those who have a legal responsibility to visit me. I like my independence. That's why I'm still driving and why I live in my own house. I may not keep the house up as conscientiously as my mother, but then she and I seldom had the same value of things. My house is comfortable for me and looks lived in. I have a number of plants inside, mostly ones that don't require a lot of attention, only regular watering or occasional fertilizing. The outside plants require more attention, as does the lawn. I'm not tall enough to prune the bush near my door, and it's grown a lot since my dad died. He was a better gardener than I'll ever be. Similar to my mother's housekeeping, it depends on what matters to you. There may have been a time when I'd have mowed the lawn or pruned the plants, regardless of the temperature, but not now. I don't do work outdoors if it's too hot or too humid. I've decided that where house and yard work are concerned, the excuse of aging has its usefulness. It seems that no matter how I try, that word keeps cropping up. Can I prune it like plants and get a few more seasons out of my existence? As long as I'm enjoying life, I'm happy to be here, and will go by the adage I prefer: you're as young as you feel. I don't feel 25, but I don't feel ancient either. Recently, a man said he thought that I was 55. It feels great to get compliments like that, although my self-worth isn't tied to what others think. Nevertheless, I lap it up. Take that, you spirit of aging. Get thee behind me and let me live my life to the fullest.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I want to share some comments that we're getting in the chat following Tolly's reading. Elena H. said, wow, Tolly. Laura F. said, thank you, Tolly. Knowing Joe, I loved hearing your clear, loving, thoughtful words about his work. And Harlem L. says, well done. And as Joyce was reading, Harlem L. already is in the chat with some ha-ha-has, as I'm sure comes as no surprise. All right, our next reader is Nancy White, and I never know how to pronounce your second last name. Amadafar, yes? Sure, Nancy. We love Nancy. Nancy has been with the Mission Hill Women's Writers Group for 9 years. And at the time of writing, Nancy was reading poetry by Langston Hughes, Charles Coe, and T.S. Eliot, because poems center her and provide prompts for daily journaling. Nancy is originally from Connecticut and has lived in Mission Hill for 50 years. She writes to clarify her thinking, document her life's journey, and connect with others. Please join me in welcoming Nancy.
Thank you. Actually, the first essay I'm going to read is not mine. It's an essay by Loretta Dixon. She was a founding member of the Mission Hill Women's Writing Group. She's not able to be with us today, but she's here on Zoom with us. She's in the Zoom room. This happens to be her birthday, and she is 95 years old. Happy birthday, Loretta. Okay. Assisted living bridge. Having played bridge just prior to COVID and moving to assisted living at Sophia Snow Place, I was intent on playing again. After much persistence, I was able to find a congenial group of 6 women, Black, Asian, and white, who enjoy playing. Carol, a novice, was game, having never played before. The group eagerly helped her learn. Several were refreshing their skills with enthusiasm. It is a gregarious, forgiving group which supports one another as we play. Norma, an avid Patriots fan, can play bridge only on days when the Patriots don't have a game. Even though her vision is limited, others help her identify the cards. Bridge aids, such as a card shuffler and larger print cards, have made playing easier. Rose is a recent addition who needs much coaching, which the group is happy to provide. Catherine is a former bridge player who relishes playing again. The more she remembers, the more she likes it. Carolyn loves the 4-hour sessions each weekend. She would like to have more playing time if it can be arranged. At present, Saturday and Sunday seem best as it does not interfere with other activities. My recent hiatus, caused by a fall and hospitalization, did not change the playing on weekends. Now that I am no longer at Sophia Snow Place, I am pleased that the group has continued to play and that they have some joy to look forward to on the weekends. Thank you, Loretta, for continuing to write and share your thoughts and your experiences with us. My essay is entitled, Our Baby Grand. The piano is not a piece of furniture, my mother would scold, if someone dared place anything but music books on our shiny, black, baby grand Steinway piano. Mama was not the pianist in the house. In fact, I never heard her play a single note, though she claimed she studied piano with her mother, who played in movie houses during the silent movie days. My father was the resident pianist. Dad was a serious man who wore a perpetual frown, a demeanor that made me a little afraid of him, even though he rarely raised his voice. Yet when seated on the floral needlepoint bench cover he and my mother had created long before my arrival, his expression turned to rapture, and I felt swept up in the music. My fear melted. Mostly, my dad played the Romantics, Schubert, Chopin, Debussy, but he could do justice to the Baroque and the classical periods too. He could sight read and play by ear. When requested, he would play rollicking tunes like Some of These Days, from his days of playing in a quartet that financed his medical school education. The baby grand was the first major home purchase my parents made as a married couple. In 1938, they were stationed in Chelsea, Massachusetts for my father's public health service assignment. Because they were relocated so frequently, they were given government-furnished apartments, accommodations that did not come with pianos. Decades later, I came upon the sales slip for the piano among their fastidiously filed documents. $500 from M. Steinert and Sons in Boston. Throughout my childhood, the piano was like a family member. In my first childhood home, located on the grounds of the Connecticut Tuberculosis Hospital where my dad worked, my bedroom was above the piano in the living room, so my dad's playing would gently lull me to sleep. When I was 5 years old, we moved to another house on the hospital grounds, and of course, the piano came with us. My older sister Betsy was the first to take piano lessons with mild-mannered Mr. King, but she soon switched to singing lessons with Mrs. King. My dad was Betsy's accompanist. When I reached first grade, I was next in line for piano lessons at the King's home, and I can still remember the Archie comic books in their vestibule waiting room. They kept us amused while we waited for each other's lessons to finish. We moved yet again when I was in third grade, this time to a ranch house my parents purchased. The living room was adjacent to my bedroom. The piano sat on the other side of the thin wall. I still loved falling asleep to my dad playing the piano at bedtime, and I was still taking piano lessons, but now with the stern Mr. Rowinski, who came to our house every Wednesday. When my mistakes evoked a loud no from him, he rattled not only me, but also my mother, who was preparing dinner in the nearby kitchen. My parents promised I could quit lessons when I reached junior high, and I did. However, toward the end of my high school years, I decided I wanted to take lessons again with Mr. Rowinski. How enjoyable piano lessons became when they were my choice. After my parents separated in 1975, the ranch home and the piano stayed with my father, and I imagine the piano provided a degree of solace for a breakup he'd resisted. My dad had the piano refurbished and continued to play it until his death, excuse me, in 1987. As my sister and I, excuse me, as my sister and I were tasked with making an inventory of the house and dividing up the property, I requested the piano, which required making arrangements to move it from Connecticut back to Boston, the piano's hometown, where I now was living. I watched it with trepidation as the movers separated the legs from the main body and packaged the parts for their van. Thank you. I felt immeasurable relief when the piano was reassembled in my living room and still playable, excuse me. Today, more than 35 years later, the piano continues to sit in my Boston living room. Though it is currently silent, some years ago, when our son was young, my husband and I made music lessons mandatory, but gave him a choice of instrument. He chose the trumpet over the piano. His lessons at New England Conservatory inspired me to take lessons again, piano lessons. I even accompanied him for one of his recitals. Now, as an adult, our son complains that we did not make him study piano. He is about to become a father, making us grandparents. I have willed the piano to him and wonder if he'll make his child take piano lessons. In recent years, it sometimes feels like the baby grand has become a piece of furniture after all. And yet, 2 years ago, when I fractured my patella and was confined to our first floor living room for several weeks, the mere presence of the piano in that room and the memory of its music became a comforting companion, soothing me like my dad's bedtime piano playing. Last year, when my husband casually suggested that we get rid of the piano, I felt my heart pumping and my face becoming hot. No way. End of discussion. Yes, it is time for me to start letting go of the many possessions I've accumulated over my almost 80 years, but not the piano, not yet. This piano embodies my dad's spirit, and maybe someday I will play it again. Now I'm the one who cautions others who deign to place a coffee cup on its ebony lid. The piano is not a piece of furniture.
Thank you, Nancy, for both of those fantastic readings. I'm just going to adjust our mic up a smidge. We have lots going on in the chat. In response to Joyce's piece, we have Yvonne T. saying, "Thank you, Joyce, that was so impactful." And Elena saying, "Thank you, Joyce, so humorous and practical." Maria in the chat is also saying that Joyce's words were all so true. We had lots of happy birthdays for Loretta in the chat, and also a bravo to Loretta from Elena. There was another response to Tolly's essay in the chat as well, from Murray, who says, "Tolly, your essay is tender and beautifully expressed, showing the path your son, an artist, has taken and is taking in response to the now iconic public event personally. You carefully bring us towards the closing words, 'All wars are fought twice.'" One more round of applause for all of our readers so far. And our apologies for our technical difficulties. We set up the room like an hour in advance and everything was fine. And then, life happens. So, alrighty. Next up is Sandra Wade, who has been with the Mission Hill Women Writers Group for 3 years. At the time of writing, Sandra was reading Consider One Another by Aubrey Johnson, which is about having the skills to adjust your life to accommodate another person in greater need. Sandra was born in Boston and currently lives in Mission Hill. And Sandra writes to pass time, and then ideas begin to form, the pen begins to write out stories, and write out the stories of Sandra's otherwise wasteful thoughts. The stories were important ones because of Sandra's upbringing and the things she'd forgotten on purpose or because they were too painful to remember. Please join me in welcoming Sandra. Oh, you have yours, right?
Thank you and welcome. The title of my article is Adventure Through the Times of Aging with No Regrets. On a beautiful, breezy October morning, the sun was shining brightly through my torn bedroom shade. I started wrestling from side to side in my king-size bed and ended up tangled in my favorite bedspread. The room had a chilly breeze. The heat thermometer was still broken. I sat on the edge of the bed, glancing down at my unsteady left leg before gathering enough strength to balance on 2 flat feet. I hopped out of bed on one leg, adjusting the do-rag pantyhose on my head. I slowly hopscotched all the way to the bathroom, touching the narrow hallway's vintage wallpaper that was starting to peel, as I made a mental note to remember to fix it with Scotch tape. In the mirror, I noticed cellulite on my backside and a few gray strands of hair laying on their sides like they were wavering at me, I'm back and brought friends. I was once independent and traveled with loads of friends who would visit without an invitation. But older adults can feel isolated and become acting upon their fantasies. Some older women, some might date younger men their adult children's age, knowing they'll shoulder the young person's expense and lifestyles while experience the dramatic changes of trying to keep up with doing controversial things. My fantasies are rooted in decisions about my happiness. The thoughts remain. Maybe one day I'll attend an event wearing 6-inch stilettos with pointed heels for only 30 minutes, my flats in my purse. As we age, the life we knew begins to fade away to non-existence. But I find ways to still feel good when I scurry into the market and run into old friends and complete strangers. They use words of endearment and address me as Mama or Mimi. This used to bother me, but now I accept it as respect. While not paying attention to my physical structure and feeling at being all things to all people, I became a senior adult. I started increasing my knowledge about aging through workshops and improving my listening skills in the church I attend. We call older adults mature in heart. One cloudy Saturday afternoon when I was 52, I decided to visit my godmother, who was highly knowledgeable and passionate about fashion. Today, they would call her a fashionista. In the 1980s, my godmother would visit the garment section in Cambridge, buy vintage clothes by the pound, then return home with beautiful outfits and costume attire. She could make and stitch a dress without a pattern within 5 hours and wear it that evening. The community would say my godmother could wear a burlap sack and turn heads as she switched down the street. We had lunch, and as she prepared to try on an outfit for an upcoming gala, as she unrolled, I noticed a thickness around her waist, which I had never seen before. It startled me. She noticed my unease and explained that it was weight gain. She called them love handles. To me, an expanding waistline seemed like fat around the belly, but my godmother wore undergarments, what today we would call Spanx, to hold it in, and she clearly stressed taking care of your body with exercise and nutrition. On my way home, I processed what I learned and promised to take care of myself. I promise. But then we used to walk, so I'm into another part. Back then, we used to walk our children to school and sit outside on the stoop, gossiping about everyone. I participated until I learned the neighbors spread untruths that I was a drunk. How dare they call me a drunk? How dare they? That night, I secretly gathered the vodka nips, stored under my bed, and tossed them in a garbage dispenser several streets over. During my marriage, my spouse accepted me as I was, tickling my belly like the Pillsbury doughboy as we go, I remember the wives' tales of sucking in your stomach to tighten your abs, but it always left me gasping for breath. Today I'm in my 70s and my midriff is part of my body that's not paying any rent, somewhere between my chest and waist. Over the years, I have reasoned with myself to get over the dislike of the way my tops look, telling myself that I can wear whatever I please. Most people are too busy with their own lives to worry about me and my love handles. Walking by, after careful consideration, I even increased my clothing size, learning to love my handles, alter any garment I'm wearing. After finally remember to scotch tape that vintage hallway wallpaper back there, I went for a walk in the park and with a smile, observed dogs on a leash, rocks and stones of various colors on the ground, a gospel that needed much love. Passing in front of me with a few elderly women, some with limitations but decked out in timeless pieces and expressing themselves through their own fashion. Sometimes when I'm out taking in the scenery at the park, I clearly see many women strutting around in good shape. A lady in the gym offered encouragement, saying that the older she became, the more she cared about staying in shape. It used to annoy me at times, seeing women wearing clothing exposing their love handles, especially if they're wearing a half a shirt in places of employment and business institutions, which is unprofessional. But in today's world, fashion is in the eyes of the beholder and solely up to the individual. Young pregnant women are exposing their bellies while other women at the beach prefer swimsuits with built-in tummy controls and cover-up. Now this story, my story, the story you're listening to, is not meant to shame anyone. Don't get it twisted. I am confident and feel good about myself. I am also always fascinated with every aspect of fashion and its symbols that speak of sophistication and grace.
Thank you so much, Sandra. We already had some comments in the chat for Sandra, no surprise. Jason S. says, the greatness and enthusiasm in which Sandra, my beloved mother, speaks, simply Mission Hill's finest. We love you, Mama, your only son. Heart emoji. I hope there's not actually more sons. And Chandra also messages to Sandra, great job, Nana, so proud of you. We had a few more comments in the chat for Nancy from Murray. Love that, Nancy. From Elena, that was great, and you can play just one scale every day. Hannah also has a message to Nancy saying, such vivid imagery, the memory of music. Thank you for sharing and bringing a smile to my face. And Harlem says, I can relate to the sentiment that your instrument is not a drink holder. Alrighty, our next reader coming up is Jen Lewis, who's been with the Mission Hill Women's Writers Group for 5 years. At the time of writing, Jen was reading The Myth of Normal by Daniel Mate and Gabor Mate to better understand her whole health, and Penguin Highway by Tomohiko Morimi for fun and light. Jen is from the East Coast and Mid-Atlantic area of North America through settler ancestors from Ireland and England, and spent most of her time in Massachusetts and Maine, and currently lives in Mission Hill. Jen writes to process her life and experiences to better understand our world and to connect her inside to the outside and other people. Please join me in welcoming Jen Lewis.
Light work. I have always felt everything deeply. I absorb others' energy, emotions, as if I must process them through my own body, rather than just observe or witness. For much of my life, I thought this was a weakness. Others tend to see it that way. You're so sensitive, lighten up. I have come to tears when passionately making a point in the office, only to have those points brushed over, dismissed. I've apologized for getting emotional, letting my voice crack, or a tear escaping. The description of the main character in the parable of the sower, who has hyper-empathy, much stronger than mine, so resonated with me that I felt seen. My yoga teacher, Marlene Boyette, recently posted online, "Energy workers must always be mindful of what we absorb, from conversations to food to the energy around us. As light workers, we stay open-hearted, knowing that honesty and clarity will always guide us towards the best possible outcome. If we aren't discerning, we risk adopting or absorbing the dysregulation of others." Now, I don't have the confidence to fully call myself a light worker, but I felt her speaking to my experience nonetheless. Maybe this is my superpower, why I feel so strongly about my mother's efforts to clear out her house as she has aged. My mother says she doesn't want to leave a house full of stuff for us to have to go through when she is gone. So she is getting rid of anything she no longer has a use for, including things from her childhood. Regularly, the local family group chat will get a text in the middle of the day with a photo of an item saying, "Anyone want this? If not, it's going to rummage or the dump." The latest text was a photo and caption, "My dollhouse. My dad and mom made much of the furniture. Rummage?" My response was quick. "Oh my gosh, please don't give handmade dollhouse furniture to rummage. That's family history." My mom is on a mission, and I have a lot of feelings about it that are difficult to raise with her. When is the appropriate time to talk about my sadness of her preparing for the end of her life so matter-of-factly? Growing up, I felt responsible for taking care of her emotions, and I'm still learning to take care of my own without taking hers on. I'm not ready to give up things like handmade dollhouse furniture that hold the unspoken love, care, and creativity from my ancestors. Like many, healthy ways of dealing with emotions weren't taught to me, and I have struggled with emotional boundaries since childhood, especially with my mom. I wonder what I would be like now if I had learned these things earlier in my life. Would I be having such a hard time dealing with my mother's aging, separating her experiences from my own and my feeling of responsibility in taking care of her? When it comes to feelings or a vibe in a space, I consider myself a canary in a coal mine, and I can usually sense them right away. Don't we need that ability? We would be a much healthier culture if we listened to the empaths, the light workers, if we took the time to feel all of our feelings rather than pack them away or ignore them, and let others do the same, learning how to be clear with our boundaries, where I end and you begin. I am 60 this year, the same age as my dad was when he received his diagnosis of ALS. He transitioned 6 years later. He rarely showed intense emotion, preferring to approach everything in a calm, rational manner. Not until the end of his life did I see true, spontaneous emotion escape into the space between us. My mom, always the emotional one, is now 84 and has her own medical and memory challenges. As her nearest potential caregiver, I have the opportunity to be compassionate, conscious, and intentional about what that care looks and feels like. So I practice being present with no expectations and accepting of what comes. And yet, I still struggle almost daily with the process. Recently, I was sitting with my mom and she said, "Oh, now why did I think of that? Mr. Parker. He was my high school driver's ed teacher." She then told the tale of her first driving test. She was told to make a right turn, rolled down the window, and stuck her hand out to signal as she had been taught by her dad. But Mr. Parker told her to use the ticker. I had never heard this story before, and it hadn't been among the usual, often repeated ones, all told the same way as if to reassure herself. Just hearing this brought some levity and unexpected joy to a sometimes difficult relationship. The themes of my mom's aging are reflected in my own. I find myself telling her to take it easy, listen to your body, and please ask for help. I need to listen to my own advice. My body is not as resilient as it once was. Not paying close attention to what I do and how it impacts me has a higher cost these days. My knees took a long time to recover from my overconfidence in running a hilly 5K that I could have walked instead. My gut is rebelling against food choices I make for emotional comfort. I don't bounce back the way I used to, and unspoken, unaddressed feelings could settle and reside in my body, becoming disease. Who will take care of me when I'm older, I wonder? I have protected myself so much that I may have protected myself from love, too. I want someone to take care of me without me having to ask for it. Underneath these worries are feelings that will need to be aired, honored, walked with if I am to return to balance, health, and happiness. And that will take courage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. A few more notes from the chat for Sandra. Harlem, again, with lots of ha-has and saying that Sandra's work was so good. Elena loved the details and enjoyed Sandra's delivery. And Murray came in the chat with lots of heart emojis and said that Sandra is an inspiration. Moving forward to our next reader, Angela Page Cook, who has been with the Mission Hill Women Writers Group for 8 years. At the time of writing, Angela was reading the 1619 Project, created by Nicole Hannah-Jones. Angela is originally from Washington, D.C., lives in Roxbury, and says, "I write because it gives me the freedom to be a creative thinker." Please join me in welcoming Angela Page Cook.
Ahmed. On November 29, 1973, at 6 a.m., my water breaks. It's time to make a move. I call my doctor to say, I'll meet you at the hospital. And when we arrive, I'm rushed in with my husband. The baby was kicking wildly to get out. The doctors tell my husband, Joe, you better go. We think we may have a problem here. They proceed immediately with a C-section before the anesthesia can even take. Hey, I could feel that knife cutting into me. Really? Does it feel like a pressure or like a knife cutting? Are you kidding? Like a knife cutting through my body. Okay, we'll give you more anesthesia. I pass out, and when I open my eyes again, I am on top of the hospital building, staring at the sky. What am I doing up here, I thought. This is weird. I don't have a body, I just have a spirit. I can go anywhere I want. I can walk through the walls. I can fly. This is really wow. I think I'll fly away. Should I fly away? What about your new baby? What new baby? Did you forget you just had a new baby? Maybe you should go back and see about the baby. Which way should I go to get back to the baby? I just moved through the building and arrived in the hallway outside the delivery room. I see Joe looking upset. The baby is being born through a C-section. I'm seeing my body give birth, but I'm standing on the side of the bed looking at the event like it's a movie. I jump back into my body as the doctor gives me the bloody baby. I say, can you wipe him off? He's so messy. But I take him in my arms and embrace him. This is weird. His heart is beating strongly now, and everyone in the delivery room is smiling. Joe is holding my hand with a big smile on his face. Happy birthday, he says to me. Oh yes, it's my birthday. My firstborn son was born on my birthday at 11:06 a.m., 26 years to the moment from my birthday. What a coincidence. It's not unusual for me to have experienced mystical events. I've come to realize this time is a frequent pattern in my life. Every year, we celebrate a mutual birthday. For the first 13 years, it was great with balloons, ice cream, cake, and lots of roughneck boy playing and making a lot of noise. Then I began to miss my own birthday, as though it had disappeared. Would I ever get it back again? Should I be feeling this way? After all, he was a kid, and I need to step up and be happy for what we have together. After that sketchy scene at the birth, Ahmed was a picture of health, without even having one sick day, until he turned 16 and began to feel like he had a really clogged nose. I had moved on and was in Nevis, West Indies, with my fourth baby in the oven and 2 other children ages 5 and 12 at my side. Because of his stuffy nose, Joe took Ahmed to the doctor in Boston, and they say he had some kind of rare form of nose and brain cancer. Joe called to tell me about the diagnosis and said that our son needed immediately surgery. I suggested Joe bring Ahmed to Nevis to swim in the ocean, as maybe that would clear up his congested nose. The doctors at Children's Hospital said, absolutely not, but Ahmed and Joe caught the next flight and arrived the next morning. We didn't trust the medical professions, and we needed some family time to process everything and to make an informed decision about what we would do next. After 2 weeks of contemplation, we returned to Boston and are arrested at the airport for having removed our son from the country without his doctor's permission. Ahmed received a surgery that required his skull be opened and his face pulled back, and a small piece of the detected cancer is removed. The surgery was a success, except for the scar it left on his otherwise beautiful face. For 24 years, Ahmed was well again. He lived a joyous and exciting life, traveled to Russia as a young artist, graduated from Fisk University with a major in art and education, and created some amazing art, sculpture, and poetry. But then he fell ill once again, and we are in a room at a Virginia hospital packed with people, both happy and sad at the same time. It is our day to ring the large metal bell, acknowledging a new beginning. The therapy is long and grueling. Every patient rings the bell to announce that they have completed treatment. They have done the deed. Ahmed was one of the younger champions also and received a Superman t-shirt. All the doctors, social workers, and other patients signed his shirt. Good job, Ahmed. Stay strong, man. Congrats, I'm so happy for you. Take care. Wherever there's a will, there's a way. One young woman rings the bell with her 3 young children, her eyes alive with a resounding faith and self-determination. That's my baby's daddy. We did this together. It's time to move forward. Everyone in the room feels such a sense of birth, a path forward, and a big sign of relief. I still have that Superman t-shirt, but my Ahmed was not victorious. After all, his proton therapy treatment was unsuccessful, but his spirit lives on.
Thank you, Angela, so much for that piece. In the chat, in response to Jen, we have Papia D saying, so wonderful to hear your work. Knowing you since high school, I feel honored to hear about your experience and process in this retrospective and future guide. Your light shines. And Elena says, love your honesty and deep thinking, Jen. Trust me, you are going to enjoy your 60s. And Murray says, thank you so much for bringing us so courageously into your private journey of profound transition. Thanks, Jen, and thank you again, Angela. Coming up next, we have Roberta Logan. Where's Roberta? There she is, okay. I was like, did she go somewhere? Okay. Roberta has been with the group for 5 or 6 years, and at the time of writing, she was rereading The Wine of Astonishment by Earl Lovelace because it's a book she enjoyed many years ago and she wanted to revisit it. It's taken Roberta a different time and rhythm of Lovelace's language and storytelling, and because Lovelace's language and storytelling is masterful. Roberta's family hails from Virginia. She was born in Philadelphia, grew up in South Philly, and now lives in Dorchester. Roberta writes because writing well is a challenge, and she wants to do it more precisely. It helps her clarify her thoughts, and it nourishes her peace of mind. Please join me in welcoming Roberta Logan.
Good afternoon. I love it that my people all over the country are responding. I titled this Second Notice. You know, it's the kind of notice, you know how you get a first notice if something is due, and then you get the second notice because you ignored the first notice? The first time she really noticed that she had crossed over, she was at the airport. She had had a good year, and for her 73rd birthday, planned a trip to Santa Fe. If she'd had a bucket list, the trip would count. She'll be reconnecting with her college roommate and seeing a place that had lived in her imagination through Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings. Arriving at her gate, she saw a gaggle of travelers who were already settling in. She stared at their whiteness. Now, it's true that many of her group members were Caucasian, but what she noticed was the other trail of travelers' hair. Most of the women had chosen not to dye. The traveling grannies were no spring chickens, but they were still putting one foot in front of the other. At the hotel, she recognized her former roommate, Lisa, immediately. Her short, sable pixie cut had been replaced with a long white mane, but her eyes and smile were still bright and curious. There was a teenage giddiness in the air as they reminisced, each remembering events the other had forgotten or tucked away. Lisa had become the artist who was emerging during the summer after they'd left Arizona, but both were grateful to sit with the other and bring back to life a different time in their lives. Recently, the reminders of aging had been more than gray hair and were popping up like the game of whack-a-mole. Each time she walks into a local secondhand store, she sees pristine sets of dishes, not chipped and battered. They were probably reserved for Thanksgiving dinners and other celebrations. Their presence signals someone having aged out or passed on, their previous home now cleared out. She is reminded of her mother's good china, now stored in her own house. She knows her own good dishes may someday have the same fate. Aging is all around her, and every friend has a story. It takes her a few steps to get up to speed when she gets out of her car. She doesn't walk as fast as she once did. Her teaching buddy's hair is now a sparkling silver and white. Her barber recounts a series of health challenges. Her gardening friend remarks how everything is drooping and sagging. Her young friend was in a panic because her eyes have taken a turn for the worse and she now needs reading glasses. Some days she looks in the mirror and knows that her mind might be working its own magic. Some mornings she sees herself as she was 10 years ago, and other times her son's camera paints a different portrait. She stares at those pictures and wonders what other people actually see. I wish I was talking about some woman in my neighborhood, but she is me. And I am just a bit surprised at my response to my most recent birthday. I see the changes in my face and feel the ones in my body. Some days I walk through the ache, and other days I'm glad the ache did not show up. Everything seems to take much more time to accomplish. 78 cents is small change in my pocket, not enough for popcorn at the movies. $78 could put a few basics in the grocery cart. 78 feels much larger than the markers of 70 or 75 that people often celebrate. I've lived longer than the previous 3 generations of the women in my mother's lineage. I've outlived 3 of my dearest longtime friends. I'm now walking in territory for which I seem to have no guide, with only a few folks to whom I can just give a glance and they will know my thoughts. It's a personal milestone and feels like my spirit is once again saying, pay attention, in bold letters. The first time I felt this warning, my friend's mother did not feel like gardening. I was stunned. She loved tending her perennials. At that moment, my intuition said, something is shifting in her spirit, pay attention. I felt the uncertainty that comes with an impending change, if not in your own life, but in the lives of the people you care for. Pay attention popped up again this summer, but at first I ignored it. A young woman had not seen me puttering around in my yard, tending the tomatoes, peppers, and greens I usually grow. She wondered if I was okay. I appreciated her attentiveness, but did not note it as a cautionary moment. This past year has had unexpected challenges, and for the first time in many years, I had no energy to dig in the dirt, fight with the aphids, or pluck freshly ripe tomatoes off the vine. Later in the summer, the call to pay attention was more explicit. I was taking a walk on a country road and spied a chipmunk laying flattened in the middle of the road. Where had he been scurrying to? How many times had he made this journey before? What was he hoping to find? It struck me that death comes and strangles the breath of life from Earth's creatures at any time or any place without regard for bucket lists or to-do lists. My spirit is again reminding me that I need to get down to business and think carefully about how I move forward.
Thank you so much, Roberta. First, before I update you on the chat, I just wanted to make a quick, very teacherly note. There were copies of the book on this front table, or if you know one of the writers and you have access to the book, I strongly recommend that you also read these pieces on the page as well, if you're able to. I wanted to note in Angela's piece that ability to be talking to herself and have one part of herself talking to the other. We really worked on how to physically show that on the page, and I think that the work that Angela did on that was really beautiful, so please take note of that. And the way that Roberta switches point of view halfway through her piece was also something that she did really intentionally and comes through when you're hearing it out loud, and also comes through really beautifully on the page, so please just take note of the written documents as well. In the chat, we have Harlem saying that Angela's piece was heartbreaking yet inspiring. Elena saying that it was such a beautiful tribute, clear and full of joy. Laura saying thank you for such a moving story. And Murray saying that it was indeed heartbreaking and also very beautiful. All right, so our next reader is Amy Dwyer, who has been with the Mission Hill Women's Writers, there you are, group for 6 years. Amy is, at the time of writing, was reading 9th Street Women by Mary Gabriel because she is interested in art, and these women were trailblazers. Amy was born in Boston, raised in Medford, and currently lives in Mission Hill. Amy writes because it gives her a platform to voice her opinions and experiences. Please join me in welcoming Amy Dwyer.
Thank you. My piece is Aging is the Cost of Living. Aging is the cost of living. The process begins the minute we are born. It creeps up on you. When you're a kid in grammar school, you can't wait to be a teenager in high school. And then after 50 years, you notice a little ache in your elbow or your knee, which you shrug off till the next time it bothers you. Of course, if you don't have a medical condition or a smoking habit, your skin may not show your age just yet. That's helpful in the illusion of youth, but eventually, if you don't die at a young age, living a life will catch up with you. All this physical aging, white hair, loose teeth, added weight, along with sagging skin, is what we all can expect in a life lived. So as you cruise into your sixth or seventh decade, every encounter with others will build your character, knowledge, and life's wisdom. This being said, now you're trying to stay abreast of all that is happening in the world, all the technology, the politics, the crises, not to mention your offspring, if you happen to have any, will continually bring to your attention, and I quote, "Come on, Ma, you're not stupid. I know you can do this. Sure, I can do it." If I read it 6 times and try to understand what's being asked, but what do they want? Maybe all this struggle is keeping me current, but to me it's just aggravation. The alternative is endless sleep, and I'm not ready for that just yet. The day-to-day existence of being 78 years old is good. Doing what you want when you want. Hopefully your family is attentive to your needs and happiness. Being in fairly good health, I may even pass my mom and both my grandmas in lifespan. They each lived well over 85 years, and my dad's mom lived to 100. They each lived well over this is all in the hands of God and destiny. Not becoming a burden to my family is on my mind. Enjoying each new day is all one can ask, and so far I'm pretty content. Society is ever changing. Some would say not for the better. Like my body is changing, not for the better. My existence started pretty well. I was 8 pounds, 8 ounces, but over the years, I would stop at just 5 feet, 1 inch tall, hardly a giant and the shortest of my siblings. My height poses all kinds of difficulties in dressing, mostly in the length of pants, jackets, and coats. I was fortunate my mom would make most of my clothes until my late teens. I had a fantastic wardrobe. Everyone thought I was an only child because I had something new to wear just about every month. My small frame made it easy for my mom to sew clothes for me, and she was very good at it. My entire wardrobe fit me perfectly. My mom even made my wedding dress, a white satin confection with an overlay of re-embroidered lace. So all that was a very long time ago. Now, selecting a garment needs to be done in person, never from a catalog or from an online store. I have to try everything on, even with petite sizes. Every pair of pants has to be tailored because my hips and derriere belong to a much taller person. Actually, my lack of height presents a hindrance in shopping of any kind. Seems that what I want to buy is always on the upper shelf of the supermarket aisle. I either have to climb up on the lower shelves or ask a stranger for help. Thankfully, most tall people are very obliging. Constant going presents challenges as well. I have to lean to the right or the left on my tiptoe to get a glimpse of the artist performing. Having to look up at a tall person, in my case, anyone over 5'9", can be tiring as well as a pain in my neck. All in all, these physical problems are a nuisance at best and oddly funny at their worst. But the pandemic was something different. The time it took certainly changed everyone's system for doing just about everything. It was frightening. Worldwide, so many lost their lives before scientists came up with vaccines. We began to realize that we could actually enjoy staying at home, slowing down and taking time to reacquaint with family. We have gotten all the vaccines now. This last COVID vaccine will make you feel just as lousy as the first one did. The process isn't any easier, even with a number confirming your appointment. You still have to use your phone to fill up yet again more forms. It took me a little back and forth with the customer service person at my pharmacy before everything was finally straightened out. Not everyone has the latest everything on their phone. Being the oldest person in the room is challenging for anyone, as well as everyone who deals with us. I try not to act like a grumpy old person all the time, but sometimes it spills out, especially with family. Computers, phones, all the apps and endless passwords. I've gotten better at the digital world, but I still have anxiety about clicking on the wrong icon and causing the loss of everything stored in the cloud, or worse, someone hacking into my finances, such as they are. Not having the body of a 45-year-old, or even a 65-year-old, having the mind of a 78-year-old. It all has its drawbacks, but taking everything into consideration, my body and mind are doing okay, and I hope we continue to do so for some time to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. A few more things from the chat following Roberta. Harlem says, such wonderful imagery. Thank you, Mom, for sharing this. Laura says that they're sorry that they have to leave, but this was a beautiful experience and good work to all of the writers. Murray, I think, is speaking again to Roberta and says, Ro, I want a copy. The shift of point of view was masterful. And Elena says, interesting and challenging work, Roberta. Your thoughts engage the listener. Alrighty, we are on to our next writer, Paula Elliott, who's been with the Mission Hill Women's Writers Group for 4 years. At the time of writing, Paula was laughing hysterically while currently reading White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and at the same time awestruck by the breadth and depth of the British Empire's multi-generational influence on racialized immigrants trying to live and love in England. Paula currently lives in Jamaica Plain and is from Detroit, Michigan. Paula writes because people say they're touched by her voice when she sings, and as a creative artist, Paula aspires to be similarly evocative with her words on the page. Please join me in welcoming Paula Elliott.
Food, glorious food. Food. This was the first visit without my parents to Uncle Alec's home. I hadn't been in Durham or seen his people for many years. Now, an adult, I looked forward to a relaxed time together and keeping an ear out for family stories. While Alec was running an errand, Faye, his wife, and I had the house to ourselves. As the afternoon sun warmed the breeze from an open window, Faye asked if I wanted a tomato sandwich. The question caught me off guard. I was coveting the attached sunroom and the view of the nearby pond. I turned my head, looked blankly, and a bit sheepishly at her. Then an unexpected command rang in my ear. Sit down, girl. I'm making you an heirloom tomato sandwich. She did. I did. I took a bite. I looked at her with a huge grin. Still smacking my lips, I savored the simplicity of this luscious treat. As a child growing up in Detroit, I typically ate fruits and vegetables that were packed in cans. Think Del Monte products in the 1950s, green beans, white beans, corn, carrots, sweet potatoes, mandarin oranges, pineapples, peaches, fruit cocktail, etc. I ate what Mom put on the table. Typically, the blue porcelain salad bowl contained iceberg lettuce, cucumbers, tomatoes, and sliced red onions. I would clumsily stretch my arm across the table, grabbing at that bottle of Kraft French dressing. The canned vegetables were served hot in another bowl. I likely shrugged and ate the veggies while anticipating the main dish, a tasty like steak, ham, or cheeseburgers with French fries. Mom and Dad and I each had a sweet tooth. Across the street from my elementary school was Miller's Groceries, a corner mom and pop store only a block away from our house. Whether walking or running or pedaling my powder blue bike, Miller's provided easy access to penny candy, chocolate bars, chips, and soda pop. Families, young and old, were obsessed with new consumer products. Bigger TV screens magically went up from black and white to color, which meant sparkly and shiny commercials were seen in everybody's living room. The city population of Detroit was taking off, with post-war veterans coming home and quickly built homes going up in every neighborhood. The lure of big supermarkets took off, satisfying the city's population boom. And compared to mom and pop stores like Miller's, the supermarkets had greater variety, were better stocked, had bigger aisles, and brighter lighting. Detroit's Ford Motor Company needed to increase car sales, and supermarkets had big parking lots to accommodate shoppers from every neighborhood in the city. Both my parents worked full-time. They wanted these modern conveniences. In contrast, born in the 1920s in the Carolinas, they grew up eating food grown or hatched in backyards. Mom recalled being a kid standing in the yard picking peaches and pears from trees and wringing a chicken's neck. She then ate it at dinner served on the table that night. My family spent much of our summers in a rural lakeside province in Canada. These vacations revealed my dad's love of cleaning and cooking fish he caught that day along Lake Erie shoreline. He loved to cook drop biscuits for breakfast, and during our evening walks, he'd delight at spotting asparagus and eggplants growing near gravel streets and cornfields. This was a puzzlement to me, because I didn't know what the big deal was about fresh foods. Years later, I learned to love them too, just like the heirloom tomatoes Aunt Faye introduced me to almost 5 decades later. By that time, I was already avoiding eating tomatoes packaged in plastic-wrapped paper containers. As a kid, I knew both my parents enjoyed using their green thumbs and delighted in fresh-grown foods, even though I was fed the store-bought processed veggies for convenience. In Canada, they helped me plant my own garden with a few veggies I really liked, but some wild animal, it was a cow, served themselves before I could. I was very upset, and it was decades before I even thought about planting anything for myself. When my mom came to live with me in my adult home in Jamaica Plain, she urged me to set up a garden in my yard because she wanted fresh tomatoes for us to eat and to share with friends. And eventually, a friend, a dedicated urban farmer, was the first to suggest the idea of growing herbs on my second floor deck. I took the idea to heart, bought some potted flowers and planted clusters of herb seedlings. Now, I yield leafy greens, lots of lettuce, and an abundant basil crop and sun-gold tomatoes who, like me, are nurtured by that deck's morning sunshine. That crop becomes the main ingredient for salads and sauces I prepare in the kitchen. I love making and freezing several pints of pesto to enjoy with pasta and share with friends and neighbors. Thanks to people, community organizations, co-ops, and farmers markets dedicated to sustainable gardening practices, my sources of food and taste have radically changed. Big time since Detroit. Every July, I make sure to find and eat locally sourced heirloom tomatoes, and in August, I buy whole watermelons off the truck of a local man who drives them up from his family's farm in North Carolina. The past 2 summers, I bought and distributed a half dozen of those watermelons to friends and neighbors. I love the idea that North Carolinian Black farmers continued to nourish my happiness and well-being. I won't forget that sunny day in Sandwich with Aunt Faye. She, not that succulent tomato, planted a seed. Aunt Faye, my parents, and my multi-generational Boston community nurture the seeds that guide my changing relationship to food and sustainable food practices. Thank you.
Beautiful work, Paula. Thank you so much. A few responses in the chat yet. Oh, to Amy. Harlem says that it was well written, well said, and thank you for sharing. Elena says, good essay and reading. Amy brings the idea of a time capsule to life. And Murray says, Amy, I loved every detail and can empathize with every step in that process. Speaking of time capsule, which is the title to this year's anthology, you'll see on the cover of the book, we have this photograph of a sculpture, and the sculpture was made by Robin McDonald Foley, who's also a member of the Mission Hill Women's Writers Group. I'm going to read Robin's bio and also read to you a little bit about the cover. So Robin, at the time of writing, was reading Masks of Origin, Regression in the Service of Omnipotence by Brian George, as Brian is a friend, writer, artist, and someone who stretches her mind beyond the norm of her typical reads. Art has been a part of Robin's life since childhood, and she can't imagine another journey that is truer to who she is. Robin was born and raised in Quincy and currently resides in Stoughton, a community just south of Boston. Robin describes the cover image, The Giver, when it's not in black and white, is made of strawberry alabaster sourced from Utah. The Giver represents a visit between relatives. Many miles between them, the table is set for sharing tea and conversation. A request for milk is met by milking the cow. Giver became the person as vessel, jug of milk, flesh of the body poured into strawberry-colored alabaster with translucent humanistic qualities. The title came to Robin easily because however much or little one had, especially food, it was shared between family, friends, and neighbors. Round of applause for Robin and her work, please. And since Robin wasn't able to join us as a writer this session, the group decided to select the photo based off of several photos that Robin provided us as options. So thank you for sharing your art in another way. We have one writer and reader who wasn't able to join us today, so I'll be reading her piece for us, and that piece comes from Catherine Delory. Catherine's been with the group for 3 years, and at the time of writing was reading When Things Fall Apart, Advice for Difficult Times from Pema Chodron, a Tibetan Buddhist nun who has experienced many challenges throughout her time. In these chaotic and tumultuous times, Catherine needs to reread Chodra's wise advice on how to deal without becoming overwhelmed. Catherine grew up in Franklin, Massachusetts, lives in Mission Hill, and writes to make sense of these turbulent and confusing times. Catherine's essay is called The Saxophone. She loves music and is often taking lessons in practice and theory. Most of the time she plays the Baroque recorder. Now she is playing the alto saxophone. After deciding to begin recorder lessons again, she was fortunate to find a skilled and talented teacher with a great reputation. This teacher introduced her to the saxophone. She loved the saxophone because it was so elegant and sensual. But today, the saxophone sits there, doing nothing, saying nothing, just being there, encouraging a multitude of emotions. She marvels at how the morning rays of the day take the saxophone from bright and beckoning to dark and challenging in the evening shadows. Even though she started out as a recorder student, her teacher encouraged her to learn the saxophone. She immediately welcomed the new challenge. In contrast to the Baroque recorders, the saxophone is a contemporary and timely instrument. She enjoys all the new sounds she made with this device. Whenever she played, she was in another world, a world without boundaries, a world encased in bursting rays of brightness and gentle rays of contentment. She enjoyed the otherness of that world. She loved the rich, warm sound of the saxophone, its range from smooth and mellow to bright and bold. Often it has a deep, soulful quality, almost like a human voice. Other times, the sound is more piercing, yet still retains its warmth and smoothness. She loved the saxophone's sound because it was so lush, full of character, and capable of conveying emotions and colors. She personified her saxophone as more than a mere musical instrument. It was a friend and challenger. Her teacher was also her friend and challenger. The saxophone and the teacher were a total package, a unified whole, bringing challenges and enjoyment. But as she continued to learn and play, she felt her lessons were becoming less challenging and more repetitive. She thought deeply on how to address this with her teacher and landed on an approach she thought was respectful and graceful. In planning her discussion, she relied on her awareness of nonviolent communication developed by Marshall Rosenberg. In preparation, she thought she had applied the 4 nonviolent communication components of observation, feeling, need, and request, which are meant to help express feelings without judgment, to recognize feelings and needs, and to make clear, positive requests. Even though she thought she had achieved her goal of presenting her concerns to her teacher in a non-threatening way, this is not how it was received. Instead, he became defensive and offensive, told her she wasn't progressing as he wanted, and suggested she go on to another teacher, and then perhaps return to him sometime in the future. She was so confused. All she had intended was to improve her lessons, and it had become a confusing and confrontational event. Reluctance encompassed her, partly because she didn't like the other teacher, and partly because she wanted to stay with her teacher. When she demurred, her teacher became even more assertive. He criticized her playing that in the past he had complimented, that her embrocher was all wrong, her fingers were clumsy, her breathing sporadic. He informed her that unless she agreed to see another teacher, this was the end of their student-teacher relationship. His words made her feel as though she were being kicked out of the nest. But why that phrase, that feeling, kicked out of the nest? It usually refers to a person being forced or encouraged to become independent, often at a time when they might feel not fully ready. She could have said she felt abandoned, chastised, insulted, rejected. She could have owned that she actually had a role in the ending of the relationship. Her teacher didn't just tell her to leave, he gave her a choice. She's the one who decided to leave because she didn't like the choices offered. She's the one who made the decision. This was a painful experience, although difficult for her to decipher why. Part of it might be because she thought that in addition to being her music teacher, she and the teacher had been quasi-friends, like buddies. Part of it might be that she was fearful of the independence being demanded of her. Today, her saxophone still sits there. She still loves it, loves its gleam, loves its changing personality with the changing light. Thank you. I'm going to do a quick check of the chat after Paula's reading, so give me just a moment. I'll take a picture so that I get everything quickly here. So some of the responses to Paula's reading from Harlem was, "Now you've made me hungry, well done." Murray says, "Yes," with 3 S's. And Elena says, "Great way of showing aging and the context of your life, Paula." That is all of our readings, our readers for this afternoon. We are so, so grateful for your time. Thank you so much to the folks who joined us here on Zoom. Thank you for getting in that Zoom chat and giving feedback to all of our fantastic readers and writers. Thank you to the folks in the room as well. We'll have a Q&A for the folks in the room, but we'll close the Zoom in just a moment. And thank you most bigly to the writers. You all do so much work. They gather here for several weeks in a row in this very room to work on their writing. And then they work on editing, because part of writing is editing. And it's no one's favorite part, but they all work on it really, really, really diligently. And it's just my honor to continue to work with this fantastic group of women. So round of applause to all of them and to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. One last thing, thank you so much to Lee, our fantastic video guy. Lee also put up the lights back here that are making the room feel like so much ambiance and vibey, and Lee is also providing us with really nice, sharp, professional recording of the event as well. So thank you so much, Lee. All right, have a fantastic afternoon.